Let's talk about some of the interesting questions from the psychology net examination, the previous papers. Now here, the first question talks about critical thinking can be increased by the following strategies. Now what do you think are the right strategies? So the right strategies here are adopting a critical perspective, thinking divergently, of course, because it's a critical thinking, and then using analogies. When we talk about mental sets, it's basically not increasing, but it is a barrier to creativity and critical thinking. So you would have 1, 2 and 3 as the right option. A very direct question about critical thinking and creativity. The next is an interesting question. For becoming a good basketball player, one must use algorithms. Now algorithms are step-by-step solutions to a given problem, and based on that you can basically train yourself to be a good sportsman. Heuristics basically talks about mental shortcuts, not applicable here. Prototypes are mental structures that basically reflect what is perceived. So that is what is the basis of a prototype, and concepts are mental groupings of similar things or similar objects together. So those three definitions again we have understood. But yes, for a good basketball player, understanding a step-by-step solution and doing good is important. So algorithms is the right option. Now here again we must know all the theories of emotions that we have covered in our lectures before. Of course, for here James-Lange theory is the right option. Now James-Lange theory talks about emotion occurs as a result of the physiological change. So emotions are the result of the physiological change. However, under the Cannon-Brad theory, as we have discussed, emotions and physiological changes occur simultaneously, both together. Reaction theory is not a theory of emotion, so just forget about it. Activation theory focuses on emotional expression, which is a result of the activation of the subcortical part of the brain. So that is the basis, and based on the question here, we understand that this is a direct question where you would have James-Lange as the right option. The next is value of behavior to an organism. It's evolutionary history, so that's something very important. It's evolutionary history, its causation in terms of stimuli, hormone and neurological events have been the study have been an area of study of ethology. So ethology is the right option, where you are trying to study behavior as evolutionary. So evolutionary is the key word that you need to keep in mind before attempting this question. The next is Jensen's level 1 and level 2. Now Jensen's theory of intelligence talks about level 1 and level 2. Level 1 includes simple memory functions and simple associative learning. So I have two things in hand, I create an association, I remember that in mind. So that is a simple level 1 learning under Jensen's intelligence theory. Level 2 talks about conceptual, abstract thought processing. Okay, so that is the basis of the two. Now Jensen basically understood this based on the complexity of the task in hand, based on the socio-economic differences and racial differences. However, he did not point out geographical differences in his intelligence abilities. So that is again very important to note. So sometimes you do have questions where the basis of a test formulation is asked, and Jensen's theory of intelligence, the basis of that, the reason for the test formulation has been asked here. The next is the concept of divergent thinking was first given by Guilford. A very direct question. Guilford was an American psychologist, and his theories of creativity and intelligence is well known. The next is again a direct question. Who proposed a componential theory of wisdom? Now this theory of wisdom was given by Monica Ardlett. Monica Ardlett has been working on the theory of wisdom and talking about the three aspects of cognition, affection and reflection. Again, you have Sternberg, who gave the intelligence theory. Baltz gave the lifespan development, so how development occurs in various phases. Chandler talked about strategic management. So all these three we have understood what are the various aspects under which they have propounded their theories before. The next is again an interesting question. Which of the following was described by Cattell using S technique of factor analysis? Now he talked about S technique, so it's a stimulus situation on personality. So that's the right answer. And he basically introduced a screen test to help in the extraction of factors. Now, if you want to know more about factor analysis, extraction of factors, loading of factors, we have covered that in a separate lecture. So just go back and cover this lecture very, very carefully. You would get more insight about how factor analysis actually works and the application of factor analysis in intelligence. The next is a very interesting question. A person approaches a therapist for anger management. Now, he says that there was an incident where he experienced anger. So, what would be the first question as a therapist that you would come up with? Now, this is something that deals with applied psychology. Over the previous past patterns, we have seen that questions like these have started to gain more momentum where applied concepts are being asked in psychology. So a good way would be how could you please explain me what makes you angry? So the therapist would basically try to understand what actually was the reason behind his anger, and then only he can proceed with anger management. So that is something that is very, very crucial to understand here. Now here you are asked about the theories that evolved in a sequence. So the scientific management given by Taylor was in 1911. Hawthorne's experiment, which is very, very important every time you have a question directly and indirectly, and this was given by Mayo in 1927 to 32. Humanization of job given by Mintzberg has been talking about how jobs would change, the scenarios would change in 1913. And time and motion studies by Gilbreth, again very, very important, lots of questions being asked from this section of recent, especially from time and motion studies and Hawthorne studies. Lots of experimental questions are being asked in the pattern. Now here we have the timeline that has been given, so you have to simply arrange that and find the correct chronology. Now these kind of questions are also asked, so make sure you focus both on rote learning as well as applicative questions, as we have discussed here. But over the years we have seen a higher proportion of questions coming from biopsychology, questions coming from neuropsychology, specifically from the sections of sensation, perception and attention. Then you would have numerous questions from statistical section, specifically the reading comprehension, that usually is either from the section on statistics and research or from the section on biopsychology. So prepare these topics very, very carefully. These are applicative topics, scoring topics, and we would be covering many more interesting sections for you. Stay tuned for many more updates from our side. Have a wonderful day ahead.